Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and the still as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 895 on the inexorable march to episode 900. Yeesh. Well, you know, it's kind of nice to get back to talking about films and television and the state of the industry, as opposed to other things. So it's nice to be here. And, you know, there's been some really interesting developments when it comes to where we are at, Hollywood is at, where the entertainment industry is at currently. And, you know, there was, would you believe that I have an article to read? There was a great article published today in the Hollywood Reporter magazine that I think really sort of codified what I've been thinking of and what sort of has been going on. But before I start reading this article, I wanted to say that, you know, I've often talked about the pop culture half-life of things, the stuff that we love. And I've always said, this is my own, again, I pulled this out of thin air. I didn't get this from some article or something, just in my own mind, observations or Robservations. I've said this for a long time, that I think pop culture has a half-life of 20 years. Now, where did I come up with that number? I just kind of made it up, but because in my own mind. And what I've always meant by that is, after 20 years, things are forgotten. A new generation comes into play, because I always figured that, and the reason I said 20 is because, you know, your first 10 years of life, there's things that you like. You have your favorite cartoon shows, your favorite Nickelodeon shows, Disney Channel, whatever it is. You know, if you grew up as an iCarly kid, or maybe you watched a film I produced, Agent Cody Banks, whatever it was you watch as a kid, it stays with you, but you're not developing enough where it sits with you still as a child, like the first 10 years of your life. Then your second 10 years, you go from being a kid to being an adolescent, you know, a teenager, and then a young adult. And so that is when your tastes start really, I mean, sure, the things that you watch when you're a kid, but your tastes start to change and the things that you like really solidify. So, and then when you become, you know, say 20 and onward, the things that you like, you continue to take with you, but then they become a distant memory as new things come in and new interests happen. So in my own mind, 20 years was sort of the demarcation point. Now, that's not to say you're not going to like things that are older than 20 years. You're certainly not going to do that. You'll always like things. But in terms of the next generation coming up, it's always being replaced. You know, there's always new pop culture. And the kids that are growing up 10 years after you are not going to like the same things that you liked when you were a kid. And I've watched things fall out of favor. And it really depends. It just depends where you're at and what happens. But our pop culture history, it's in the rear view mirror, and you can see it less and less and less as it goes back behind you in the distance of memory or years. and I believe that to a certain extent, you know. Now, here's what's really interesting. I think in the 20th century, pop culture was essentially the same. You know, you had movies, you had music. Well, you had music, then you had movies. And then in the 50s, really, you had television. You always had books. But for the most part, entertainment was something that you ingested. It was, for the most part, a solitary activity. You know, you read a book, you watched a movie, you watched a TV show, you listened to a radio play, you listened to an album or something. And it was a relationship that you as the individual had with something that was outside of you. Some artwork or some literature or something that someone else made, and you would consume it, and sometimes it would touch you in a certain way, but it was an external voice, and it stayed that way for a long time. Now, as gaming and the internet and now social media came into favor, it really didn't really exist before, say, 1990, unless you're on the whole earth electronic, or what is it, the whole earth electronic link, that was and, you know, DARPANet and all the early proto-internet stuff. And then AOL, I mean, I started really going on to AOL and interacting with people in the early 90s, mostly to go to Star Trek message boards. I'll admit it, but that's kind of what I did. But now the thing that has really changed, especially for the younger generation, is that we are the entertainment. So you're watching me right now. You can watch TikTok videos. You can watch Reels on Instagram or Shorts on YouTube. We're all watching each other now. We have become the entertainment. And in a way, I won't get into the psychological aspects of it, but even when you're playing, look, when I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima, you know, I'm the hero. It's me. I'm the protagonist. And I've always felt that way. You know, when I was even playing, when I started, I didn't have a Gen 1 PlayStation. I got a PlayStation 2. And I started, you know, really liking the Capcom games. I liked Onimusha. I liked Devil May Cry. Hell, I liked Ico. You know, I liked those games. But because the games were so sophisticated and the graphics became so good, and they've just gotten better and better and better, that the way that I would be entertained by a movie, video games, especially with some of their, I was talking about the Metal Gear Solid series not too long ago, the narratives became so sophisticated that they were as good as a movie. Your favorite movies even. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 that everyone's playing right now. Everyone's talking about the greatest video game ever. You're the protagonist. And you're going through something. It's no longer a passive activity to watch a movie or a TV show. You're the protagonist having an experience. And the thing about that is it's incredibly valid. It's as valid as any other kind of entertainment. And it's different because the level of sophistication and graphics that we now have in gaming, and it's just going to get better. Augmented reality, Apple's new, I forget what they're calling it, but their glass, what that's going to allow people to do. You know, we're going to have games where you're going to be fighting the Walking Dead. You'll put on glasses with your friends. You'll go out into the world. It'll be tapped in with Google Earth, and you'll get an augmented reality or whatever they're going to call it, post-apocalyptic sheen to your neighborhood. You'll be able to go out and you'll see computer-generated, like Pokemon Go was crude compared to what they're going to come up with. And you'll be able to go around your whole, I mean, it's going to be dangerous. People are probably going to get hit by cars. But the technology is going to be incredible. And that's where entertainment's going. And passive entertainment. I mean, people always have novels. I think people are always going to want to consume drama, fiction, movies, TV, whatever. But we have a whole new generation of people that don't give a fuck about movies. Let me tell you, when I was a kid, movies were the end-all, be-all. I was a movie fan starting at 5 years old. I mean, movies dominated my life. And I thought about them. I thought about how movies were made. I thought about who wrote them. And for me, movies, music, I talked about the pop culture, the 80s. It was all very intertwined. I mean, you'd go see a John Hughes movie and buy the soundtrack because you'd have the Psychedelic Furs singing Pretty in Pink. Or, you know, you'd have Simple Minds singing Don't You Forget About Me. It was all, and then the music, even though it was used in the movie, and that's maybe why you bought it, the images of that film suddenly were in your mind, but the song had a life of its own. and then you'd go out and buy other Simple Minds records. So all of it but it was external things that you brought into your mind and you incorporated them into your life. With video games, when you experience a video game, you're the protagonist. It's happening to you. So it's different. You're making decisions. You're controlling the character. And then your own entertainment, people are now sharing themselves, right now, sharing of themselves with you. So my experience now, I could sit down and watch. Last night, Elizabeth and I watched Arrow's 4K Carlito's Way, which, by the way, chef's kiss with that transfer and soundtrack. But I still love movies. But here for me, I spend hours with you guys, whoever's watching right now, talking to the audience. And you, rather than watch a movie, have chosen to listen to me. Whether you're just listening to me at work or doing something, you're in headphones or you're watching me right now, it's a different form of entertainment where you're watching me just sitting here and we're exchanging ideas. And in a way, we have a certain level of interactivity here as well, which is also, unique. You can send in super chats, or the tip link is down below, or you can send me letters and we can have a dialogue, which is also something that was different when you watch television movies. So the entertainment landscape is irrevocably changing, and it's never going to go back to the way it used to be. And it just isn't. So what's happening right now is Hollywood, which is a large business, a great export business for the United States, is now trying to figure out how can it stay relevant in the entertainment landscape. As the people that grew up and loved movies, of which there are multi-generations of those, they're still here, but how do you keep them here? And it's all changing. Can you get young people to come back to a theater? Well, if you give them Taylor Swift's The Eras Tour on a genius move, but people aren't going to see the Eras Tour there for any kind of say, the same way you'd watch Shawshank Redemption. They're going to see the audiences of mothers and daughters that are going to go see Taylor Swift are going to see their friend. Taylor Swift is not just a performer. She's not just a musician singing. She is the frontline representative of an entire generation, multi-generations. She's every girl's best friend. If you're a Swiftie, and if something appears to you as being Swiftish, it's a different thing. It's a different experience. But anyway, that said, I would love to jump in to this article that I found extremely interesting. It's a long one. Now what? And first of all, I should say this article is by Rebecca Keegan, Alex Weeprin, Lacey Rose, Leslie Goldberg, Pamela McClintock, Winston Cho, and Rick Porter. And again, this was published today in The Hollywood Reporter. Now what? The 5 crises confronting a post-strike Hollywood. As brutal as 2023 has been for the entertainment industry, it's possible the town will someday look back on this moment wistfully. And not just because of the picket line solidarity or cozy mogul hangs in the bargaining room. The strikes helped earn gains for Hollywood workers in such areas as streaming residuals and AI, just as they cost the national economy more than $5 billion. But the walkouts also marked the decisive end to a bullish and ultimately unsustainable chapter in Hollywood, an era that was already on its way out when writers put their pens down on May 2nd. This was an age when money flowed freely and companies vying to build their nascent streaming platforms competed for talent with generous and plentiful overall deals. An era when 599 scripted shows a year kept 599 different casts and crews employed. One when actual human beings, not AI, did the creative work of making films and television shows. But that heyday has officially ended, thanks to unsexy factors like high interest rates and industry consolidation. And the strikes gave studios cover to drop their unwanted deals and trim their budgets. The new post-strike Hollywood is going to be a much leaner one. The business has now gone through a pandemic, a dual strike, and economic downturn, and the companies have sobered up, says one agency executive. The business is getting tougher for the working-class writer, director, producer. You're going to see a contraction. Post-strike Hollywood also is likely to transition from what has been a strange era in the entertainment business, one which success was often divorced from compensation thanks to the streaming formula of big upfront paydays without the prospect of performance-based rewards or even information about how a show or film did on a platform. It's a system that many industry sources say that led to a lot of crap. Where was the incentive to stay on budget or make something great, asks an agency source. This is an incredibly important idea, because for those of you out there who don't understand how movies and TV are made, you have a script that you decide, for whatever reason, your script is getting made. That script is broken down by very talented professionals, a line producer and some others, and they figure out exactly how much something is going to cost. Then your show or movie is budgeted accordingly. Now, I've been a writer, I've been a producer, I've been a director, I've edited films. I've always worked on a budget level. And I'll tell you, the first time I ever worked in television, the only time I've ever worked in television as a director and editor, I was hired to write a Cinemax series. I was hired to direct a Cinemax series called Femme Fatales that my Free Enterprise cohort Mark Altman had created with Dave Williams and Steve Crozier. And it was a show. It was designed to be a titillating, erotic thriller of a show. But the thing about Femme Fatales was it had to be shot in 3 days and in 12-hour days, because if you go over 12 hours, there are a lot of penalties that happen, and suddenly your budgets go, and the show had gone over budget because it was a really ambitious schedule, and what we were trying to do in terms of the look and feel of the show was not just your typical quote-unquote Skinemax show. We were trying to do something a little bit more highbrow. When I was hired to do that show, Mark said to me, he goes, okay, I'm going to bring you on, but he said, you have to promise me you will finish directing every day. You have 3 days. You can't go over 12 hours. And I said, okay. Now, making movies and making TV is not really rocket science. I didn't have any control over the script. I had a script that Rick Kopp had written, and I was told it's called Till Death Do Us Part. It's the first episode I directed from the first season. I ended up directing 5 episodes of the show. So the reason, or the only way that I was able to make my 3 days in 12 hours is because I came prepared and I planned. And I asked Mark if I could go meet the department heads. We had no time. There was no time to make the show. But I went, and my first episode was supposed to take place in Hawaii, but we're shooting it at a house in the valley. But I went to all the keys. I went to the costume, the costume designers. I went to the production designer, and I said, here's what I need to pull off what I need to pull off. I need flowers for the girls' hairs. I need hair. I need their hair down. I need to see tropical dresses, whatever. And I told the production designer everything I needed, pre-planning. And so when I hit the set, I was able to rock and roll. And you also have to understand that unlike feature films, when you are directing television, it is not the director's set. It is the producers, showrunners, and most importantly, the first AD's set. Now, you as a director, if you're a good television director, the key is to shoot what the producers want from you, so then they can take your footage and edit it together in a quality, in the format that their viewers and the studio is used to getting from them. And that is a creative, as far as a TV director goes, that is a creative challenge. But if you can work within that system, it can be a very gratifying life if you want to direct TV. And I loved doing it. But the key for a TV director is pre-planning. You need to know, first of all, what kind of a show. You can't suddenly decide, we're going to do split diopter shots and we're going to move the camera in ways you can't do that. You can still, in terms of your coverage, in terms of the way you want to work with actors, you work with the cinematographer on the show, because the cinematographer doesn't change from episode to episode. But the way you have to tell the story is through literally cinema and shot choices. The way you choose to shoot something, which stays in keeping with the show. Anyway, it also requires experience, and it requires talent, and you have to know what you're going to do. Just like the showrunners who are running a TV show have to know how to produce TV. It is incredibly important to know how to do that. And making a TV show is the last place in the world that you want to have be a training ground for new talent. Anyone who knows anything about producing TV knows that you need people on their game. You need people that are veterans. You have to have people that know exactly what they're doing. It is not a place where you should, let's give somebody a chance. I'll tell you a funny story that Jonathan Frakes, number one, he wanted to direct. He was interested in directing Star Trek The Next Generation. He expressed his interest to executive producer and showrunner Rick Berman, and Rick Berman made him go to what was variously called Paramount School, Paramount University. And Rick Berman made Jonathan Frakes do everything from shadowing directors to going into the edit bay, and learning exactly how a TV show is made. And he had to do it for the better part of a year before he was able to direct an episode of the third season of Next Generation called The Offspring, the episode with Lal. That was the first episode that Jonathan Frakes directed. Only after learning how to do, and not just being an actor, but learning the process. We don't have that anymore. You can go out and make a cool TikTok video, music video, whatever, something. Hey, you're going to direct TV. And that's why we see so much. Or, we have to have more inclusion. We need more different kinds of people directing, which I think is a laudable goal as long as they know what they're doing. And the problem is that in order to check boxes, people with less experience have shown up and production has suffered. And we hear that all the time. You have veterans having to train people that are not necessarily ready or experienced enough to be where they're supposed to be. They end up taking over, and it doesn't work out very well when it comes to the budget. You got to know what you're doing. So anyway, where was the incentive to stay on budget or make something great, asks an agency source. Here's the thing. There is nothing, when you're making movies and TV, it is imperative, it is essential that you understand how to stay on time and on budget. And it's doubly important on a TV show. But apparently, unless you're making Citadel and you've got the Russo brothers as your producers or whatever, the profligate spending and what people are getting away with in the streaming era is frankly, from my perspective as an independent producer, quite disgusting. And it's really hurt the industry. And also the combination of the profligate spending and the lack of experience and this idea to do right by giving, people that wouldn't necessarily, it's not that people don't have a leg up. It's that people aren't experienced. And the people that are experienced have spent time becoming experienced. And now what's ironic is, that guy, that girl, or that person who's experienced, let's bring in some new blood. We can pay him less. You always get fucked in the back end thinking that way, but that's Wall Street talking. But anyway. There needs to be more of a focus on quality, says Avatar producer John Landau. That doesn't necessarily mean tentpole. Whether it's a big movie or TV show or a small one, we have to make it good. You'd think that would be the first thing. We have to make it good. The problem is there's very few people nowadays that know what is good. Storytelling begins at the literary level. We have people that all they've ever done is watch TV and movies. So what you get from them is a regurgitation of things that you've already seen, as opposed to a distillation of many different influences to create something interesting. If all you've ever done is watch TV, then all you're going to do is make derivative television. You're never going to make something particularly interesting. But if you read lots of history, lots of fiction from many different eras, you expose yourself to all different kinds of input, you're going to come up with something more original and something better. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that anymore. That's why we get science fiction shows that feel like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because there's a lot of people, that was my favorite show, and they base everything they do off that. The characterization's off that. And there's a lot of TV shows you can go, I know what you grew up watching. I can see it right here. You've plugged and played with that. Anyway. Post-strike, expect companies to be pickier about what they make, and talent and financiers to be more closely aligned on fiscal responsibility and quality. For some creators, more guardrails and feedback will be welcome. People are hungrier now, says producer Todd Black. Writers are, producers are, and studio executives are. I think we're going to see over the next couple of years, hopefully, more productivity and more selectivity. And in some ways, I think it's a good thing. Oh, it is. In the meantime, however, the industry must still grapple with 5 crises the strikes might have overshadowed, but certainly did not solve. Number 1, streaming is a lousy business. Streaming is awesome. Consumers can watch what they want when they want. The fierce competition between services means more choices than ever. And the drive for scale means that streamers have been available at a bargain price with the ability to cancel or resubscribe at will. There's just one problem. The streaming battles took very lucrative entertainment giants and made their very rich profits vanish faster than CNN+. The so-called streaming wars really trace their origin to a few fateful moments in 2017 and 2018. Yes, Netflix had been serving original content for a decade before that, but in 2017, its streaming business kicked into high gear, with annual net income jumping from $186 million to $559 million, and it would double again to $1.2 billion in 2018. Its stock price, which opened 2017 at about $130 per share, would soar to more than $360 in 2018 as Wall Street began valuing the company as a tech platform, giving it a multiple rivaling the likes of Google and Facebook. See, this is a horrible problem because a tech company is not an entertainment company. And technology, if you're Apple or something like that, you don't have to make good fiction. You have to make good products like iPhones and laptops and tablets. And I'll tell you something. You know who doesn't know how to make great fiction? Well, actually, they do know how to make great fiction, but in a different way. Wall Street and corporations don't know how to tell stories. Corporations always hire marketing people to tell their story. And the idea that marketing people now are sometimes always in charge of deciding what stories get told, utterly ridiculous. Makes no sense. And corporations, that's why they're so big on IP. Well, if something succeeded in one format, then we know it's already going to have an audience. Let's put it into another format. Well, I'll tell you something. We learned here on YouTube that isn't always the case. I'll tell you something. Jeremy Jahns, one of my favorite people that I've ever met in this online space. Such a nice guy, so enthusiastic, and he's a great reviewer. Great reviewer. And I think anybody who watches this show, I'd be hard-pressed to think that there's somebody who watches this show that has not watched Jeremy Jahns. I watch every Jeremy Jahns review. I like him as a person, and I like him as a reviewer, and I like what he does. But the thing is, if you try and take Jeremy Jahns into some other realm, like they did at Collider, making something like Awesome-tacular, it's not that the show wasn't any good, but people know Jeremy Jahns doing this thing. And so they want to see him do that thing. And does he translate over to something else? I mean, that's a tough call. But a corporation would say, yes, if this person works over here, clearly we can just pick that person up and plug them in there. Or it doesn't work that way. It works that way for a corporation. It might work that way for Wall Street. It might work that way for analytics. It does not work that way for entertainment purposes. And it certainly doesn't work that way for audiences. You can't just take somebody generic. Look at The Rock. Look at, Black Adam. The Rock, you put him, he's the great as The Rock, but you put him in as Black Adam. Did people show up? No. But a corporation, the executive would wonder, well, why not? Why wouldn't people just show up for Dwayne The Rock Johnson? Well, because Dwayne The Rock Johnson has to be in the place that most people want to see him in. And many actors before that, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, might want to have stretched, but did people want them to stretch? And that's something that Wall Street or studio heads can't necessarily tell you. What you need talented writers and directors who have vision. You have somebody like Quentin Tarantino going, I'm gonna cast John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. People are like, what the fuck? I'm doing it. I'm going to go get Robert Forster and I'm going to put him in Jackie Brown. Who the fuck is that? Well, it doesn't matter. People would tell him no, but he's Quentin Tarantino. Who's right? The filmmaker was right. Now, I'm not saying you should always believe the filmmaker, but I would much rather believe a filmmaker who has a track record or who has a vision, who made Reservoir Dogs. If you don't give that guy a second chance and let him do what he wants to do, you never would have got Pulp Fiction. But that takes vision, and that takes one person who has a gut instinct. We don't have that anymore. There's nobody who runs the studios that is allowed to have a gut instinct anymore. Publicly held companies, you're beholden to Wall Street and what they want from you. That isn't entertainment. That's not how it works. It's not how it's ever worked. Hollywood has never become successful following a trend. That's why fucking Taylor Swift and her management, God bless them, call up AMC and go, yo, we are at SoFi Stadium and we decided to film the concert, and hey, we're going to control it. We want it to be on this day. I don't even know what their revenue split is. I bet they could get 75-25. AMC gets to distribute. They call the shots and the studios get all pissed. But hell, why would Taylor Swift, what was the incentive for Taylor Swift to ever go to a studio? When you can go directly to, they made the movie. They used SoFi Stadium's state-of-the-art technology to get their cameras going. You know, you record five shows. Taylor gets to pick which one of the song, which best performance of the song gets into the movie. You cut together the Eras film. I bet they made that movie. They filmed it in 5 nights. And I'll bet you, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe they were recording the whole thing they were recording the whole thing. They probably did it both ways. If I was doing that, if I was making the Eras, I so want somebody to do, hey, anybody who's involved, the director, Taylor Swift herself, please come on this show. I want to do a making of the Eras tour movie, because definitely a disruptor. But here's the questions I want to know. I just want to know how it was made. So you've already got the soundboard there. You're recording, you get the sound off the soundboard. Did you have to do anything different to make it like in Dolby Atmos or 5.1? Or did you already have that? Probably had it covered. Then you've got all your cameras, and you just hire a great, whoever your favorite live director is from television or whatever, hire that person to come in, record it live, and you edit on the fly. And then if you're recording all 5, you can maybe play with the editing, do it differently depending on what song or what coverage or whatever. Or, so you're editing on the fly. You do the whole thing, but at the same time, if you were also recording the raw feed from all the cameras and you didn't like how it was live, then you go back into the raw footage and cut it the way you want it. I mean, that's how I would have done it. I would have taken all the live feed and recorded that. And at the same time, I would have been editing live on the fly. So you've already got edited versions. Then you take all 5, you decide what you want. And if Taylor wants things, I want a close up on this line, you got it. And then you mix it. How long did it take? Because that movie, I think from the amount of time they spent actually making it to its profitability, it might be the shortest, a movie that took the least amount of time to make that's going to make the most amount of money. I think. I don't know. Love to find out. Anyway. Okay. The result of the streaming wars, Netflix's success panicked Disney into announcing in 2017 that it would pull all of its content from Netflix and launch what would become Disney Plus. In the aftermath of that debut in 2019, the floodgates opened with NBC Universal introducing Peacock and the arrival of Paramount Plus and HBO Max, now Max. The result has been tens of billions of dollars flowing into the streaming content and away from linear TV, and massive losses for the legacy media companies that enter the space. Comcast, Disney, Warner Brothers Discovery, and Paramount lost a combined $10 billion on their streaming services in 2022, according to a review of their annual reports. Only Netflix reported a profit, $6.5 billion, and some, like Paramount Plus and Peacock, have yet to see their losses peak. It's a dire situation, particularly with Wall Street no longer valuing streaming companies as tech giants, and it's a situation made worse by the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, which closed the pipeline for TV shows and films. It also raises an interesting question: can streaming even work as a business model? Speaking to investors and analysts on September 19th at Walt Disney World, Walt Disney CEO Bob Iger argued that indeed it could. When Iger laid out 4 key priorities for his company, making its streaming business profitable, it was at the top of the list. The company plans to make less content and spend less on what it does make, though getting key franchises like Star Wars back in theaters is a priority, wrote JP Morgan analyst Phil Cusick in a September 20th note, adding that he expects Disney Plus to turn a profit by the end of fiscal 2024. A top streaming executive tells The Hollywood Reporter that they believe profitability will come led by advertising and from getting the value proposition right. Many services launched at low prices to lure as many subscribers as possible as quickly as possible. That's changing, and not only are the prices rising, but they are increasing in a way designed to drive subscribers to ad tiers where these companies can further monetize users. Okay, this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. So television worked from the beginning. A television show all the way back to the 50s was sponsored by an advertiser. You know, Chesterfields, the greatest smoke you've ever had, whatever their ad line was before they couldn't advertise cigarettes on TV. You know, they would pay for the show. So a show would get made, and the money that was used to make the show would get recouped by advertising. And when network shows are on TV, you have multiple advertisers. And if you had a hit show, then the amount of money you could charge for an ad went up. So each episode of each show was making money. Now, with a streaming service, there is no more money. So if you're Netflix, all the money that you have coming in is from your subscribers. So let's say you have 100 million subscribers paying $20 a month. You know, that's $2 billion a month coming into you, and you have to make everything that's on the platform that you've made or bought or licensed or whatever, all of it has to be paid for by your subscription money. So once you have a library, okay, you've got all this stuff on your platform, but if one thing is a runaway hit, unless people are subscribing to see it specifically, you're not making any more money. And, you know, that's problematic. And there's only so many households in each country around the world that can subscribe to your service. So there is a finite amount of money that subscriptions will garner you. So if you're going to profligate spend or get into a streaming war with other streamers and make a bunch of stuff, and your subscription base doesn't cover your nut, that's why you're not profitable. And somebody like Disney Plus doesn't make enough shows to be profitable compared to, say, Netflix. And Amazon and, of course, Apple don't care, because when you subscribe to their streaming service, you're paying for Prime, which is shipping. You're not paying for a subscription to Amazon. You're paying for shipping for their products. That's what you're paying for. The TV shows and the things, the streaming material they're giving you is not based on anything other than they want to drive their retail business. Apple's the same way. Apple's making shows, and yeah, you're paying for Apple Plus, but it's also an adjunct to their sales for phones and tablets and computers. It's a different model. But like Disney Plus, they thought that by getting a fixed amount of money every month, no studio could have the kind of cash flow you can get now from a streaming service. It's like, oh, so they're thinking that, my God, we have 100 million subscribers and we're going to charge $20 a month, even though not everybody does. We get $2 billion a month, and then for 12 months. So we know we're getting all that money in, so you got your overhead. Problem is, you know, when you're making a bunch of Marvel shows that cost $250 million a show, that gets eaten up very, very quickly. And when you're not licensing a bunch of foreign TV shows like Squid Game or documentaries or whatever it is you're doing, you could never hope to compete with Netflix, that, by the way, already has a backlog of shows. So when you go on to Netflix, there's deep, deep, deep catalog that you can go watch. So that was problematic. But then what everybody jumps in and everyone got paid. They made their money. You can make, 6 episodes that are 40 minutes long and $300 million. Not a very good use of funds, though, because what are they doing? They're star fucking. Let's get the Russo brothers to come on. But whatever happened, let me take you back to Femme Fatales. I had a certain very minuscule budget to work with. I had 12 hours and 3 days to shoot the show. I didn't get any more money. I didn't get any more time. That's it. And so when you're working in that arena, that means that you learn how to discipline yourself. And in order to effectively spend money, you have to come in on time, on budget, and on schedule. You have to do what's called making your day. And the way you make your day is, you know that, okay, on this day, the way it's been budgeted out, the way the line producer has set it up, they know that today you need to shoot 8 and a sixth page, 8 pages and a sixth of a ninth page. That's what today's schedule is. That's a lot on a TV show. On Femme Fatales, sometimes we'd have to shoot 12 pages a day. So you better know what the fuck you're doing. You better have a plan, and you should make oneers and blocking your friend. That's what I'm telling you. And make sure that you are on the same page as your DP and your first AD. And I'll tell you, do what I used to do. Walk the day. Walk the day. As soon as you get on set, grab your nosh, your coffee, whatever. Get your DP and get your first AD. Take your script, take your schedule, look what you're shooting, and take your DP on a walk. Go, here's what I want to do today. Make sure your DP and make sure, most importantly, your first AD know what you want to do. All right? Walk the day. And as long as they're ahead of you and they know exactly what you want to do, you can't come up and say, oh my God, I've come up with this brand new shot. No. Can't do that. Come in on time, on budget, and on schedule. Make it happen. Netflix profits continue to grow, and for the very first time, a mainstream service from a legacy media company should turn a profit. Max, the service from Warner Brothers Discovery, was just about to break even in quarter two, and it's on track to turn a profit this year. CEO David Zaslav told investors during the company's most recent earnings call. Warner Brothers Discovery, of course, was particularly aggressive about slashing costs last year, including removing TV shows and films, bad girl, from the service to avoid paying for shows with little traction. If the other legacy media companies are a year or so behind Warner Brothers Discovery, that tracks. Peacock and Paramount Plus are aiming for break-even by the end of next year, as is Disney Plus, though the impact of the strikes as a help or a hindrance to this goal remains to be seen. And then there's the Charter Spectrum wild card. If the cable giant is successful in bundling together all the entertainment streaming services as it's doing with Disney Plus, the legacy companies might just be able to find their way to profitability the old-fashioned way, by letting a cable company sell it all together. Some of the most popular shows on streaming are from the late 1990s and early 2000s anyway. Friends, Grey's Anatomy, The Office. Why not bring back the business model too? It's crazy that they've realized that, the television business worked. The streaming business, which again was Wall Street thinking, let's make a shit ton of money off the next fiscal quarter without thinking in the long term. And everybody, all the creators are like, let's make a deal. Let's sign Shonda Rhimes or Ryan, for $5 billion. No, $500 million, or make some big deal, and that's great, but not the greatest way to do business. Anyway, and that brings me to, that's the first thing, but I wanted to talk about Daredevil. So the news broke very interestingly. First of all, before I talk about Daredevil, let me just look in here. So we've got some tips, and people are writing in. Anonymous, maybe this is Alexander Wilson. The news about Daredevil doesn't surprise me. In July on CNBC, Bob Iger said that Disney tasked Marvel with making TV shows. They are a movie studio that didn't have any substantial experience in making TV. So we're going to pull back on content to focus. Yeah, and that's the problem. They were making TV like they were making movies. I mean, normally, as everyone knows, especially if you've seen, say, Pulp Fiction and explains what a pilot is, and that's like pilot, those are pilots, not like From the Right Stuff, which is what I was doing from the Happy Bottom Writing Club. But there's a reference for you. Come on, if you haven't seen The Right Stuff, it's 40 years old this year. Go see it. Hey, Warner, it's your 100th anniversary, but there's no 4K of The Right Stuff. Why? I don't know. That's just an aside. But what I would say is television work, because a pilot, so a network would commission 15 or 20 pilots during pilot season, where they would make one show. A writing team and a whole producing team would come on, and they would pitch an idea for a show. And if a network liked the idea, they would have a pilot script, one script. A pilot was written for something like Lost, and they would go make a pilot. They'd actually go make the show, and they were usually pretty expensive. And if that first episode turned out to be great, the network would either order a full season, order 13 and a half season, or whatever, based on that pilot. Marvel didn't work that way. Marvel wanted to make a show. They're going to go out and make the entire show, because they figured, well, we're not going to commission a pilot and then we're not going to move forward with it. They didn't work that way at all. They should have. And I think it would have been much better if they, hey, you're making TV shows. There's been a tried and true way that's worked for 70 years. Why not do that? But hey, it didn't work out so well. And that's why I don't think any, even WandaVision, which is probably my favorite, I don't think any of the of the Marvel shows have been particularly satisfying. There's been good ones. I liked WandaVision a lot. I thought Miss Marvel, for what it did, was pretty good. I love the family. That family dynamic was very TV-esque. But I think none of them succeeded nearly as well as their movies. And it's because they didn't think of them as TV shows. They thought of them as movies split up into parts. And philosophically, it didn't work. So Anonymous goes on, or Alexander Wilson goes on, this must be to follow up. So Alexander Wilson sent this in. To follow up, he says, I think the Daredevil decision was made back around that Iger interview. I think there will be more news like this with shows reworked or completely scrapped. At the end, I'm happy that they acknowledged their mistakes. See, the difference is a TV show shouldn't have these kinds of mistakes. It blows my mind that they had a writing staff and they had directors and let them go. This is problematic across the board. They want to get new talent. They want to get more diverse voices. They want to get all kinds of people that we haven't seen before. Admirable. I mean, I've often said the more voices, the new voices, the voices we haven't heard, bring them on. We're richer for it as an audience. Problem is, if they don't know what they're doing, we're not going to hear their voices because they fuck up. And that's a lot of what's happening here. I think you have less experienced people in positions that they're not quite qualified to be in yet. And we have these kinds of epic failures. I mean, Daredevil, you have 3 seasons of arguably the best Marvel TV show ever, which is Daredevil, even though it's not part of it wasn't the MCU, it wasn't made by the MCU. Steven and I, the showrunners, it was the best of the Marvel shows. So they already know what they're doing. And what's weird is they bring back Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, the same characters, to be, is it a multiverse? What is it? I think that was a mistake. What is this show? Let's get rid of the secondary cast, but keep the primary cast and recast. Very weird. So I don't think they really knew what was supposed to be going on. Sujith. So it was a problem. And now, actually, before I get to Sujith, now what we have learned is they'd filmed like 7 episodes or something, almost half the season, which on a Marvel show, I mean, was that, I can only imagine, $150, $200 million? I mean, we're talking huge money. It didn't work. And now they're scrapping. They got rid of the directors and they got rid of the writing staff. Here's the thing. You should never get this far into something and decide to scrap it. This, my friends, is bad producing. Now, I'm not going to blame Kevin Feige for all of this stuff, but I really want to know, how do you go from the first 3 phases of the MCU, which, and I've said this quite a bit, I loved for the most part. It was all good to great to me. Yeah, even Thor, the Dark World, even Iron Man 2, which has got better in retrospect, even Captain Marvel were enjoyable romps. Maybe the worst you got was a C+, but Iron Man 2 is a lot more fun than you might remember it. Sam Rockwell, man, come on. Drunk Tony Stark, it's got great stuff. And then you've got War Machine and Iron Man fending off Justin Hammer's like drones. It's fucking great. What's not to love? And you still have Favreau's touch. But anyway, how that took a nosedive and how we end up getting Thor, Love and Thunder and Quantumania, I know a lot of people like them, but I think the core job of those movies, what the MCU used to do, was lead. I'm still waiting for anybody. I mean, I know, yes, I do know that there was a little thing about the Celestial coming out of the ocean on a website in She-Hulk. But I would think after the Thanos snap and a Celestial coming out, if the Celestial still kept coming out and the Eternals didn't stop it, the Earth would have cracked in half. Maybe Galactus would have come and eaten the remains. It would be all bad. And no one seems to be particularly concerned when Arishem the Judge shows up. I don't know what's going on in the MCU. I don't know who any of the Avengers are. Where's the team? Who knows who's on the lunchbox now? I should know, because in the first 3 phases, everything built upon everything else. Everything led into something else. And so this larger story was beautifully constructed. And by the time you get to Infinity War, which, by the way, I dare say, is a marvel of storytelling. It truly is. And it works like gangbusters. What happened? I don't know. Sujis says, hi from India. When I was a kid, I used to enact the Three Storms intro scene. The Three Storms intro scene from Batilic in the Shower. Oh, Batilic in the Shower. My first John Carpenter movie. That would be Big Trouble in Little China. The Three Storms, which are the Masters of Death from Shogun Assassin, a.k.a. Lone Wolf and Cub. But yes, because it was great. And the music, did you do the music too? Because the music for Big Trouble in Little China, also by John Carpenter, is great. No, I'm not talking about the theme song by the Coupe de Villes. I'm talking about the actual down now, that. Ricky B says that I'm currently up against Doug Drexler, and he is currently live on the Shuttlepod show. Well, I love Doug Drexler. I didn't know I was up against him, because that's what's great about YouTube. You know, you got everybody. This is actually going to be a 2-part show. I was going to tell you I was going to make this a 2-part show. I was going to be on for an hour. This show's going to be broken up because I have so much to talk about. But I didn't know that, Ricky B. I didn't know the Shuttlepod show was on. I don't know if I would do that. But so streaming is a lousy business. So that's the first of 5. Now, the next thing that I wanted to do, wow, I just realized that, so here, let me read this story, the actual Deadline story that is pretty amazing that I really wanted to jump into, because this is stunning to me. Stunning. I mean, how many tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars plus, are getting spent on things that are getting scrapped? This is unprecedented. We haven't seen this in television history. By the way, speaking of which, where's the Shogun miniseries? How long has that been in production? How much you guys spend on that? I hope it doesn't turn into another The Stand. Marvel's Daredevil Born Again to undergo creative overhaul with new head writers. Our friends Anthony D'Alessandro and Nelly Andriva wrote this article. Following a production pause in mid-June due to the writer's strike, Marvel Studios is planning on bringing in new scribes and directors on the Charlie Cox series Daredevil Born Again after determining the show wasn't working. Okay. After? You know why it wasn't working? Because you went forward without scripts that were good. I'm telling you. Everyone knows when they have a good TV script, you can read it. You should know. Of course, I thought the scripts for Secret Invasion were a lot better than what we wound up with, because I had read those. But again, they were like 2 years. I read scripts from 2 years before. Who knows what went on? Who knows what? Only the shadow knows. Head scribes Chris Ord and Matt Corman and the episodic directors for the remainder of the series were let go. Corman and Ord will remain executive producers on the 2-season series Daredevil, which first aired on Netflix. Follows Cox's Matt Murdock, a blind attorney turned crime-fighting superhero. Less than half of the series' 18 episodes were shot. Well, that means less than half could be 7 or 8 episodes. I mean, that's the length of a Marvel show that they're spending $250 million to make. So if they spent that much money and they scrapped all of it, that's insane. It's also, I'm sorry, as much as I used to call Kevin Feige my Lord and Savior on Collider Heroes, for this kind of, if they're scrapping, let me go on. If they're scrapping, it's bad producing. It's bad producing across the board. It means there were no showrunners. They don't have showrunners. They need showrunners. They need great producers. They need a great writer's room. And with these streaming shows, treating them like movies that are broken up or however they're treating them, I'm sorry, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for this. And to me, this shows massive incompetence at the highest levels. And I don't mean to, I'm not talking about like, I don't like Star Trek Discovery because I can't stand the way it's written and it's on the whatever. This is a fundamental systemic misunderstanding of how to make television. Because you don't see this happening to Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. You don't. Because, Vince Gilligan knows how to make a TV show. Why? Because he's been doing it for 30 fucking years. And that's why. And amazing that this would happen. How much money is spent. By the way, you don't want you look, I don't mean to rip on Rings of Power, but even those guys, it's not like they had a huge track record in how to make television. Was Rings of Power made the most effective way? Well, they went from New Zealand to Ireland to make their show, or back to the UK. That didn't bode well either. How do these people get these jobs? Sure, they're well connected, they're friends of people, but they don't know what the fuck they're doing. And this costs the industry hundreds of millions of dollars. Anyway, since adding a slew of Disney Plus streaming series on its plate, Marvel Studios has seen its plate overfilled. The studio and its billion-dollar grossing and CinemaScore movies is known for producing high-quality tentpoles. However, declining grosses, audience and critical reception on some series and films post-pandemic, Eternals, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, is coming as a wake-up call for the Kevin Feige-led studio to take greater care and quality control of their product moving forward. It was announced back in September that while the second season of Loki was sticking to its 2022 schedule and the second season of the animated series What If would go over the holidays, other Marvel series were shifting their premiere dates. Read Hawkeye spinoff Echo. It's now eyeing a January debut instead of November. Animated series X-Men 97 will go early next year, while WandaVision spinoff Agatha, which is now called The Darkhold Diaries, probably after the Sex and the City spinoff, starring Kathryn Hahn in the title role, is looking at a drop date leading up to Halloween of next year. Daredevil originally debuted on Netflix. However, after the Disney Plus launched, a slew of Marvel series on Netflix reverted over to the Mouse House's streaming service in mid-March 2022. Other Marvel series that went from Netflix to Disney Plus were Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, The Defenders, and The Punisher. There's already been some crossover with Daredevil and newer Marvel fare. Cox's Murdoch made a cameo as the lawyer to Tom Holland's Peter Parker in the mega pandemic hit Spider-Man No Way Home, while Vincent D'Onofrio, Gangster Kingpin, was the main baddie in Hawkeye and will continue on in Echo. Which is, by the way, a little bizarre, really, when you think about it. What does that all mean? Now, also, I wanted to talk about Stephen Knight. So if you have a showrunner that sets up a show, the way you do a contract is people have claim on the shows that they are show running. For instance, I'll give you an example. If you direct the pilot of a show, if you're like David Nutter, who's directed many great pilots, started up Full Moon Entertainment. If you're David Nutter and you direct a pilot, and if that's all you direct, you're an executive producer. If you've got a great agent, you're the executive producer of that show forever. And you make money. My good friend Brian Singer directed the pilot for House. I think he directed one other episode. That show ran 8 years, and he got a check for every single show. And then he owns a piece of that show, and when it gets sold into syndication around the world, he's making bank off that show. So you direct one episode, you direct the pilot, you're an executive producer of that show forever. And that's very problematic when it comes to shows like Star Trek, when you see how many people wind up as executive producers and get a piece of those shows, even though they're no longer on those shows and they're still getting paid. How many producers are on Star Trek Picard Season 3? How many producers on the new season of Star Trek Discovery? Yeesh. Anyway, Stephen DeKnight. This is from Denise Petsky wrote this on September 19th, 2023. And this has been covered by various online sites, but I wanted to add into it. This is also from Deadline, September 19th. Stephen DeKnight, showrunner on Netflix's Marvel's Daredevil series, calls the upcoming Disney Plus series an old Disney scam that will keep the Netflix series creatives from getting what is due to them financially. Writer and executive produced by Covert Affairs' Matt Corman and Chris Ord. Covert Affairs, because everyone loves that show, right? That's why they picked them as showrunners for the new Daredevil. The new installment centers on Charlie Cox's Daredevil, otherwise known as Matt Murdock, an attorney by day and crime fighter by night. Vincent D'Onofrio reprises his role as mob boss Wilson Fisk, a.k.a. the Kingpin. DeKnight served as the showrunner for the first season of Netflix's Daredevil, which launched in 2015 and ran for 3 seasons. DeKnight was responding to a post on X, formerly known as Twitter, by a grip named Thomas, who is part of the IATSE union that represents film, TV, and stage crew workers. Thomas wrote that the retitling of the series to Daredevil Born Again is a fucking scam designed to reset guild contract terms to season 1 levels. By the way, he's not wrong. That's exactly what it is. DeKnight replied on X that it's an old Disney scam where they slightly rename a series to reset contract terms back to the first season. Needs to be addressed by all the guilds, unions, and crushed. He's right. Daredevil Season 4, a.k.a. Daredevil Born Again, that show is absolutely based on the 3-season Netflix series. Now, what happens after 3 seasons is when you do a 4th season, everyone's fee goes up. Renegotiations, all this, you make a lot more money. The same show costs more money because it's already a hit. Daredevil was a hit for Netflix. They bring it over to Disney, and what does Disney do? They take the lead. I mean, Charlie Cox probably was cast by DeKnight and Netflix or Marvel, whomever. Same with Vincent D'Onofrio. They take these choices that were made by the former showrunners, and they bring them over, but they don't take the showrunners with them. They retitle the show, and it gets reset. It's not. No. It's not a sequel to Daredevil. We're using the character again. Stephen DeKnight is right. It was a shitty thing to do. And what does it all mean? I don't know. Is it in continuity? This is another thing at Marvel. Your audience, your core audience, are comic book fans, and we want to know. I mean, the seasons of the Netflix shows, the first Daredevil, made reference to the Chitauri attack in Avengers on New York. Now, not maybe necessarily directly, but they did talk about it. They did reference it. But now that we have the multiverse, we can change everything around. It's bullshit. Stephen DeKnight is not wrong. They go and they take his good work. His work is good enough that your lead actors are now going to get repurposed into a different show. And normally on something like Star Trek, you'd see Stephen DeKnight come in. They make him a producer, executive. They make him an EP, really. They pay the man. That's how business should work. Au contraire. It's not good. Other announced main cast members of Daredevil Born Again include Margarita Levivia, Sandrine Holt, Michael Gandolfini, Artie Fraushan, and Nikki M. James. John Barenthal's Punisher is also reprising his role. Crazy. The Punisher's coming too. Cox spoke with NME last year about his role in the upcoming reboot. This has to be a reincarnation. It has to be different. Otherwise, why are we doing it? Oh, I don't know, because the first 3 seasons were successful? Cox told the publication, my opinion is this character works best when he's geared toward a slightly more mature audience. My instinct is that on Disney Plus, it will be dark, but it probably won't be as gory. Daredevil Born Again, which has been filming in and around New York, was 3 months into an 8-month shoot on an 18-episode new season for Disney when it suspended production due to the WGA strike. Here it is. Here's Stephen DeKnight's tweet. He does. It's an old Disney scam where they slightly rename a series and reset contract terms back to first season. Needs to be addressed by all the guilds and unions and crushed. So that's where we're at. Now, listen, all of you lovely folks at home. I am going to leave this episode on a cliffhanger, and I'm coming back later tonight, and we're going to do part 2 of this show. So only because I have to go to a family thing, and so I'm going to split this show up. I'll probably be back late night, maybe around 10. I don't know. We'll see, because I got a lot more to say, and we're going to have a lot more fun. And you're having fun. So anyway, we're going to talk about the other four crises in Hollywood. So listen, imagination connoisseurs, I've never done a 2-part show, but I'm going to do a 2-part show, and it's going to be great. Now, I've caught up with all the super chats and tips. By the way, you can still send super chats and tips in when I'm gone, because I'm going to come back tonight and finish. So, should I leave it off or just say, hey, thanks to Tom Jr. Jackson for being here? But I'll be back, as Arnold Schwarzenegger said. So come join me for part 2 later. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. So I will see you all later tonight, for part 2 of this show about Hollywood.